This episode brought to you by Studio Network Solutions. Media teams have enough things to worry about. Storage shouldn't be one of them. That's where Studio Network Solutions comes in. SNS makes your shared storage, media management, and cloud workflows easy so you can focus on what you do best, creating. See how SNS can help your team at studionetworksolutions.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to Broadcast to Post. Today's topic is deploying AI effectively in creative teams. We're thrilled to be joined by Blackspot, a forward-thinking creative agency based in New York. And over the past few months, Blackspot has been at the forefront, integrating AI into their creative media pipeline. In this episode, we're discussing the boundaries and guidelines Post facilities need to consider when using AI in client projects. While many focus on which AI tools to adopt, few discuss how to roll these new systems out to staff and clients. We'll explore the challenges of migrating production teams to AI, cloud versus air-gapped solutions, managing security and legal concerns, internal policies, ethics, team adoption, and the hidden pitfalls facilities should consider. Joining me today from Blackspot is John Laskus, Creative Director and Founder, and Anthony Carvalho, the Director of Post-Production at Blackspot. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. John, let's start from the beginning. How did industry trends and expectations influence your decision to adopt AI at Blackspot?
Well, we've really seen a lot of change in the industry over the last 5 to 6 years. Realistically, the pressure to close that fast, good, and cheap triangle is getting greater all the time as audiences want to see more content than ever before. Clients want to see more content than ever before. And you have to put it in more places, and it's got to be really, really good. At the same time, so we're in marketing and entertainment. We make promos and we make trailers and things of that nature in addition to long form, but we do a lot of short form stuff. And with the decline in production due to COVID and then also due to the 2 strikes, we found that a lot of our clients are relying more than ever on library content. And so how do you create new stuff from these vast reservoirs of content that have, that our clients are trying to mine? And, sometimes we're looking at an order of 1,000 hours of footage and how can you economically go through that, look at it, process it, and then creatively come up with a way to utilize that if you are simply going to do it with traditional post methods. And we found it was almost possible to do that without employing, hundreds of people. So Anthony and I started looking around for tools that would have let us sort of automate the workflow a little bit to give us an advantage to make world-class stuff that we can put anywhere almost instantly. And we started about 18 months ago looking at some tools that were not quite mature, but over the last year and a half, things have really exponentially improved and really given us an advantage that we wouldn't have otherwise had.
So, Anthony, what things, when Blackspot was looking at AI, what things were you looking for? Was it tools that would edit, or is it tools that would help log, or what were you kind of looking for at the big trade shows?
Well, we were looking for improvements across the board, really. We had been working internally on a system called Thresher that it takes the very end step of a post-production to deliverables process, and we found a way to automate all the reformatting, the resizing, delivering and adding bugs to specific versions, all of the unique exports that you have to do. Really the stuff that computers should be doing anyway. So we found a way to do that, and it saved us, a 90 to 1 hours, a 90 to 1 ratio difference. So we were obviously very interested in finding anything else like that out there that's either exists or on the horizon.
So it sounds like a lot of the tools that you were looking into were things to optimize kind of the grunt work, right? Mm-hmm. The reformatting, the logging, as opposed to putting together something that was just ready to go. I think what a lot of folks are interested in because there are so many AI tools out there, are you able to kind of walk us through what your current AI workflow is?
Yeah, and we had several. I think with any innovation, you're always going to be looking to combine tools that are excellent and put them together in a novel way in order to make, a greater improvement overall. So we don't have any one tool that's a silver bullet. We do have tools that help us with logging. So one of the tools that we use is called Carol One, and that is a system that lets us look at huge libraries of content, and it automatically meta tags it. And it's not really meta tagging; like we're not actually looking at meta tagging. What it lets us do is we can type in a natural language processing kind of way, or in the way that you would use ChatGPT or another large language model. We can ask it questions as if you've got the best assistant editor on the planet, or the best team of assistant editors on the planet. And so that lets us really find B-roll. It also helps us find situations that we would not otherwise be able to find, because it will actually infer based on your query the kind of results that might work well for you, and then it ranks it. And it really gives editors or producers or writers tools that, or the ability to really understand hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage simultaneously. So that's one thing that we use. We use another tool called Quickshare, which does do some automated assembly of cuts. And so again, it's sort of like working with a really talented assistant editor. So you can feed it a bunch of sequences and say, okay, well, from this show, like let's say we worked on an episodic a crime procedural, and they wanted to put it on a social media channel. So we needed to have 2 to 3 minute cut downs. We needed to end with a cliffhanger in order to drive back to to their streaming platform. And so we're able to actually just put a show in about 10 minutes. It processes it, it logs it, it ranks sentiment, and then we can query it and say, make this 2 minute cut down, or make this 3 minute cut down. Start with a joke, end with a cliffhanger, and don't show any dead bodies. And it's incredibly effective at doing that. It can do it in about 10 or 15 minutes. So, we're really watching our workload decrease by a ratio of about 10 to 1 in those situations. But the more interesting thing is that because it's doing the work that assistant editors were doing, those assistants are now free to be creatives. And so because they have access to all this stuff, and they don't need to be doing the grunt work and the sloggy work that's difficult about the post-production process, all of a sudden the creative we're getting out of our junior people is just as good as we're getting out of a lot of senior people. So it's really opening up and expanding our ability as a creative agency to really to use everybody to their maximum potential.
So if I understand correctly, just to paraphrase kind of some of the things you said, is that you're loading the libraries of footage, the previously shot content, finished content, indexing that utilizing Carol One, which is from Scale Logic, and then you're using Quickshare, and your assistant editors are then prompting or crafting a prompt to then take the results from Carol One and put that into a assembly cut that's then reviewed, refined, and then an editor is making it making the edit more pleasing for the end client.
Right. So the editor is still, like, you really need a talented team of people to do this. It's not, you can't just rely on the tool. You really need to have top-notch creatives who are doing doing that last step. You're just giving them the advantage that is we equate it to the introduction of the NLE. Right. So before the NLE came out, before Avid was introduced, we would, every time that you needed to make a change to film, it cost a fortune. Or if you're doing tape to tape, the process was just onerous. Yeah. When you got an NLE, you could go to cut 30. Right. And so they're
got an undo button.
Right. And so this is sort of the same way. And to give an example, we were working with one network. They gave us 25 years of shows. And they asked us to make one Christmas or holiday related spot. So with a team of 5 people in 2 days, working with 1,000 hours of footage, we made 25 spots, and they were all great. So that's the potential of what you can do. So instead of going to cut 30 now, just make 25 different versions, or make as much stuff as you possibly can and decide what's going to work, or plug that into an algorithm on social where you find you're not doing A and B testing, you're doing A through Z testing. So you know which actually is going to work, which actually is going to engage people and actually drive back to whatever platform you're actually trying to have your call to action send people to.
That brings up a really good point. Anthony, can you kind of talk about the infrastructure that was needed to accommodate these AI tools?
The infrastructure wasn't all that different from what we had already as a already running studio. The amount of hardware that we added barely takes up 2 spaces on the rack. A lot of this stuff is just software running having computers that do post-production work they're already up to a certain standard, so this is just running software on top of those. So as far as actual infrastructure, not much different than what most people already have.
And these tools worked with multiple NLEs, or was this kind of siloed to just one type of video editor?
They did not work with any NLEs when we first got them. In fact, that was one of the first things that we worked with Scale Logic on with Cara One. We got them to, because you would do all of your searches and it would be like, oh great, here's all my searches, and those searches were awesome. Don't get me wrong. But we worked with them getting an AAF export. That way, it just shows up as a timeline in your edit system, whether you're Premiere, Avid, or whatever. That's kind of the thing that's been cool working with a lot of these companies so early in the process. It's kind of good for both of us, right? They're building the tools that we need, and they're figuring out what the needs of the customers or the user base are, right? So it's been a fun process doing that.
Yeah, and a lot of the tools will exist as either a panel in Premiere or through AIF with Avid. Obviously, Avid's got a different API situation from Premiere, but there are. You do have a lot of options. There are on-premises tools that you can use. We use both those, and we do use web-based tools as well. And they both have their advantages and disadvantages. But if you're working with a web-based tool, like there's a tool called Social Department, which is really amazing, which will take almost any piece of content you had and customize it for a specific audience or specific demographic. That's entirely web-based. So you upload that to the cloud. It's all completely secure. And then it processes there. So then your investment from an infrastructure point of view is nothing. All you're doing is you're paying them for the storage. You pay by terabyte or by whatever metric they have. So it seems to us like the 80% of the tools that are currently available exist as cloud-based, and then the on-premises stuff, you're buying a server, and they really are not tremendously expensive or difficult to integrate. I think we have 3 or 4 different kinds of shared storage here, and it works. All the tools work very well with all the storage we've got.
John, you mentioned utilizing various tools. So, some were web-based, some are on-prem, which kind of brings up the point of the hidden expenses or hidden costs you didn't anticipate. So when speccing this out and looking at the financials, what were some hidden costs that you might not have thought of prior?
We have actually been very surprised at how economical it is, because what you're getting, I mean, as an owner, what you're getting out of these tools is so much more powerful than whatever the expense would be. When the pandemic started, our first attempt at going remote, because we're completely remote at this point, we were using a remote product from one of the larger NLE companies, and it was costing, it was considered a very powerful tool, but it was expensive. It was cheaper for us to actually replicate that on premises. Once we have that infrastructure, applying everything else, applying these AI tools is not onerous at all. It's sort of shocking, because if you consider that you are freeing up so many people to do so much more stuff, like if you have an expense on order of $50,000 to $100,000, you're gaining so many more people. It's really a force multiplier for your staff and for your actual creatives, that the cost really, it really becomes de minimis. It approaches zero, because you will find that you are so much more effective as a creative team by using these tools.
For folks who haven't worked with AI or even asset management systems, one of the core things is making sure that the media that's being indexed or meta tagged has the right tags, so the computer systems know what to do with that content. So, Anthony, how did you kind of approach the difference between metadata tagging versus kind of traditional indexing?
Well, now we don't meta tag anything at all. Meta tagging is you're limited by whoever's doing the description, right? So you might miss something. So regular, it really depends on how granular you want to get with the data. You're also, when you're doing just strict meta tagging, there's no way to compare with how should I put it? When you're doing regular meta tagging, you're limited by whatever the tags are there. So you'll get omissions, right? For instance, if I'm looking for an audio bite that says this guy is the MVP, um, if it was recorded as this guy is the most valuable player, I won't get that unless somebody added that to the meta tagging. So I find meta tagging super limited. So we don't really tag anything anymore, which has been great.
Yeah, and you can get that kind of metadata out of the tools, but to Anthony's point, you're not using the tools to their proper potential if you're worried about something like, you can search in phrase find, or you could search a transcription and you can find the specific stuff that you want, but you're not going to get that inferred stuff. I was working on a documentary and I was stuck. I couldn't make a connection that I needed to make. And so I just typed into one of the tools, tell me why nitrogen and phosphorus are so damaging to the Chesapeake Bay. And within seconds, I had 10 clips and I could make that connection instead of going through. But if I had gone through and searched for the transcript, which I had been doing previously, I was not yielding anything that was useful for me because I wasn't answering the question in the right way. So it really gives you the power to really just say you're just talking to a very knowledgeable colleague is what you're getting out of these tools. So it's you sort of need to change the way that you think about what post-production is, and also change the way that you think about the way that you manage media, because it is phenomenal the difference that this stuff will make.
Both of you have mentioned that you were working with these companies very early on. In fact, you mentioned that one of the tools didn't even work with NLEs at the time. So that is just one challenge. Anthony, what are some of the other challenges that you encountered when deploying AI at Blackspot?
Oh wow, that's not a short list. One of the issues, or one of the problems, just inherent in just the term AI with stuff. It's such an open sandbox, right? And every single problem requires either a different set of AIs, a combination of them. So literally, I mean, almost by design, every new project is a new design problem, right? You got to figure out we're just doing cut downs of this thing. Okay, cool. Let's use this tool for that. We're working on a documentary, like John just said. Let's use the NLP to figure out some scientific facts or whatever. So yeah, every day is a different challenge, and they're mostly unforeseen.
Yeah, and I would add too, then staffing wise, it's, when you introduce these tools, people are reluctant to use them because there's a lot of, obviously when you talk about generative AI, which is not what we're doing, we can't do anything generative for legal reasons. People get worried, like your writers are going to freak out. They're going to say, well, it's going to take my job. And your editors are going to freak out because they say, well, why am I not the right person to do this job? So convincing people that these are just tools that enhance their creativity instead of something that is coming for their job or coming to take, their profession away from them is a challenge. And we still have people on staff. Like we have an enormous show that we do that a lot of the team won't use the tools because we haven't convinced them yet. But if you start slowly, if you start to implement something as simple as like Trent, where you're getting your transcriptions done, or if you're doing a transcription in Premiere, where Avid, just starting small really helps you introduce people. But the resistance is real and warranted. But one of the things that and part of the great thing about having a forum like this is to convince people that you don't need to go to the generative route in order to reap the rewards from what this technology can do.
I think that's a really important point. And for those who haven't been dipping your toe in the AI pool, there's a big difference between generative AI, which is generating new media, and then analytical AI, which some companies call utility AI, which is more applying computer vision and AI models to content and then saying, this is what I'm seeing, quote unquote, in the content. Yeah. And as you mentioned, it's getting the content ready for the creatives to put the human touch on. It's not replacing that part of the creative process.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole point. And one of the examples I use there's a color software, Color Lab AI. If I'm coloring a commercial, I usually have about a day to do it, 30, 60 seconds or whatever. 70% of my day is just leveling, right? Just getting the blacks to match, just
Just your balance pass.
Yeah. Just my first pass, right? This does it in like 15 minutes, right? So I'm not going to spend just half a day color correcting. I'm going to spend most of my day doing what a colorist actually does, like color. I'm going to have extra time to do some Windows passes. I'm going to make it look nicer as a result, right? I'm not taking that work away. I'm just making it better in the same amount of time.
Oh boy, and just as another anecdote, which I love to talk about because it just seems like magic to me. But Anthony was once working on a project that was shot. It was shot anamorphic in PAL, and it came in and it wasn't soft. It was out of focus, and it was 40% of the content for the show. He made it. He put it back in focus easily, and the network didn't even. They were not even concerned. It's the tools are crazy, and they just get better every day.
I'm sure a lot of facility owners are concerned about the security and data protection, right? We've seen some web-based AI systems potentially utilizing user input without their approval. We've seen some newer AI systems that may be phoning home to China. So what are some of the things that you've had to worry about in terms of the data protection and security of the content that you're putting through AI?
You have to worry about it all the time, not from the vendor point of view, but with your clients. You need to be very clear about the tools that you're using and make sure that they're okay. Because we have some clients who will not let us work with certain tools. Fortunately for us, the ones with which we do work on a regular basis, especially the on-prem stuff, that is a closed large language model. So it does not look at the internet. It does not talk to anything. It exists purely inside that box, and nothing can escape. And it's very sound. Some of the other tools that are out there, you really do need to make sure that they're MPAA secured. And anybody who's in this business, I mean, we all get audited for security all the time. These automation tools also need to be audited all the time to make sure that they are compliant with the terms of service or the scope of work that you've signed with what your client is. But we have a large sports client. It took us 8 months to get through legal, and they preclude us from using some of the tools that we have access to. We had another client who another vendor had used a tool to simulate an actor's voice just for 1 or 2 words. Showrunner saw it, freaked out, and it took us a long time to write that contract because people need to understand that their data is not going to be used to train anything. They need to know that it's not going to leave your facility, or that if you're using a cloud-based service, they need to know that it's not going to leave that service and be used for any other purpose. And so the thing that we recommend highly is have your lawyers talk to your client's legal department, disclose everything. Every time you add a new tool, have that conversation with your client.
So we've touched on this a little bit, and I kind of want to pull on this thread a little bit more, and that's the ethical considerations on using AI, whether it be personal moral beliefs or it becomes business practices. Can maybe you elaborate a little bit more on kind of the ethical considerations that you went through before deciding to pull the trigger on AI?
I mean, so any time that you introduce a new tool or anything that's going to affect the creative process, you really have to work with your creatives to make sure that they're comfortable with it. Because that is the heart of what we do. If the creatives aren't happy, you're not going to have a good product. So that's the biggest thing. We are, 100% confident that the tools that we are using are simply there to give everybody who works with us a better experience. Let them make better stuff, give them opportunities that they wouldn't have, and also to make more stuff, better stuff. But that is a conversation that you need to have with the people who are actually creating the stuff that you put out into the world. And if they're not comfortable with it, some people simply won't use it, and that's also okay. As far as larger considerations about working with other people's intellectual property, we will not employ a tool that we do not know is not completely secure and completely closed. And, we have some stuff that we developed proprietarily, so we know that's secure. We constantly have conversations with our vendors to make sure that we are not ever going to leak anything into the outside world. And I think that if you stay with that utilitarian or iterative AI, kind of stuff, that there really aren't any issues that you need to address that are not personal with the people who are making the stuff. If you get into generative stuff, it's a completely different world, and we won't touch it.
Anthony, from a user level, what kind of policies or guidelines did you put in place for the creatives so that you did kind of walk that line between ethical and responsible AI use?
Yeah, I think the initial the initial talk we had with everybody, a lot of, especially the older editors and stuff, they were a little trepidatious, this in the beginning, but I can understand that. But like John just said, if people don't want to use it, cool. All right, you want to do math longhand, go for it. But ethics wise, we really didn't have any, moral ambiguity. I mean, we're not doing anything generative. We're just handing you tools to make your job faster and better.
We got really lucky when the tools were sort of in their infancy. One of our most experienced creatives was really reluctant, didn't want to try it, but he took the chance. He used some automation stuff to first he made his own cut, and then he applied the tools, and the tools gave him about 80% of where he wound up without using the tools, except that they did it instantly, whereas he had spent 2 or 3 days coming up with his original cut. And so when he saw that what is coming with his end product is still the stuff that's coming out of his mind and his own creative vision, it just got him there faster. Then all of a sudden he was the biggest convert, so that's sort of the way that it goes. This does not get in the way of your own personal vision. It just lets you get there faster.
We talked a little bit earlier about lawyers and some of the potential legal ramifications of utilizing AI. Have there been any certifications or any kind of audits that you've been through when things check out, so folks who are watching this know that there is a path to be, shall we say, given a thumbs up that these tools can be used?
Yeah, and it depends it depends on the client. Everybody's sort of got their different issues that they have. Some gigantic networks are, they're normally okay with their standard audits because they're so in-depth anyway. Smaller clients want to talk more about the individual tools, and they want to talk to the engineers, and they want to talk to the company that manufactures it. If it's something that you haven't developed de novo, something that's not in-house, they want to talk to the engineers who are actually developing it. And sometimes they'll say no, and that's okay. There are a lot of tools out there, and more come out every day. I just can't stress enough that you need to be transparent about it.
You mentioned something earlier that I also want to examine a little bit more. You mentioned voice cloning, right? You were using it to get a few words, and that
we weren't using it.
It wasn't you.
We weren't using it. No, a client that we work with had another company or somebody in house, I think, use it, and that's what, and then they had all like a across the board policy, no AI in this house kind of thing. But yeah. So
Yeah, but that's an overreaction. We understand why. Obviously, if you're using that kind of technology, you're in violation of all the SAG contracts that were just signed. So we can understand why there's that overreaction to close stuff down. So, this is a process of not only teaching yourselves how to use these tools, but also teaching how your clients how to use them, and that it's okay to use the tools, and just letting everybody let everybody be nervous about it. Let everybody take small steps. Just because the rewards are so great, usually people come around pretty quickly.
The proliferation of AI tools is predominantly in the cloud, right? There are obviously tools that you're running on-prem. So I'm kind of curious, how did you evaluate the cloud-based tools versus the on-prem tools, and what kind of made your decision to go with a more pay up front concept with on-prem than kind of pay as you go in the cloud?
Anthony told me not to be an idiot, is what happened. He just said when we started looking, he said, try every tool you can, and what do you have to lose? And that was basically it. So it's I as the owner of the facility, I prefer the on-prem stuff because I always know what my costs are going to be. But if you're using stuff that's in the cloud, you just build that into the budget. So it's not there really isn't there really isn't a significant difference in utility. Both are valid. You're going to find a lot more stuff in the cloud than you will on premise, but that shouldn't scare you away from it.
So looking back, are there things that you wish you knew when you first started? Advice you can give folks who are looking to kind of incorporate AI into their traditional post-production pipeline?
That sounds like an Anthony question.
Well, looking back, the only thing I can say is, just try everything. I mean, it's not like most of these things have trials, right? And there's a lot of options. So, the whole risk reward is it's not that crazy here, right? And if you don't like it, you don't use it. I wouldn't tool up specifically for a job having not ever done it before. So, use this time to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Because everybody's going to need a different, a different solution, because everybody's working on different types of things. And all of these things, the cement is still wet. So, make relationships with the place that you're probably the first 10 customers of. They'll work with you. At least that's what I found in our experience so far. But yeah, no, like I said, just go out there and try it.
Yeah, and don't expect everything to work or anything to work perfect. You really need to combine them. Like, you need to work with them. You also need to be willing to experiment and to push as hard as you can. There's something that I would say that I wish we knew, because we didn't know anything when we started with this, because it didn't, it didn't really exist. We had spent some time working on our own natural language processing system. So we knew a bit about what it was, and we knew what the limitations were. But yeah, it's a constant process of making sure that you communicate with the vendor, and because they do want to talk, like, they want to make it better. This stuff learns all the time. It gets better every week. It gets better every month. So just always ask questions, try everything, and try to break it. And if you try to break it and try to combine things, then you'll wind up with the tool that really will help your team accomplish amazing stuff.
So in production and post-production, a lot of folks are aware of the Holy Trinity, right? The good, fast, cheap, and you can only pick two, right? So I understand that, John, that there's kind of an augmentation you'd like to make to that.
I mean, I wish that we couldn't solve that problem. I would rather everything to be good, fast, and expensive. But realistically, that's not where the market is, and that's not what people need. People need good, fast, and cheap, and it was not possible to do before. It is possible to do it now, and it's going to get more possible going forward. So, I would say embrace it, enjoy the ride. Because you're going to be happier with the stuff that you can create if you embrace this change.
So as we wrap up, I always like to ask, where do you see the industry going from here? What do you think is in a year, in 5 years, and forward?
I mean, I would imagine that a lot of the tools that we're using today will be incorporated into mainline LPs. And Anthony would be better qualified to talk about this, because he actually speaks with, everybody who's trying to incorporate it better.
Yeah, I think in the very near future, there's going to be a lot of really great breakthroughs. They're not going to be very sexy. It's going to be like, oh, this AI groups all your clips and attaches the audio, all stuff that, like, again, computers should be doing already. And I think, I hope NLEs, companies start opening up a little more and allowing the streamlining of, like, being able to build the plugin packages, and because they're going to need to, because they're going to start eating their lunch pretty soon. You know what I mean?
But yeah, it's not there's no if you look at just the changes that have happened in the last 3 or 4 years with NLEs, you can see the progress, because automatic transcription is something that would have been magical 6 years ago. So all that stuff, it does happen. Or every time you see a demo in NAB, like, you sort of expect that it's mostly going to be vaporware, but this stuff is actually maturing and becoming real. So there's no question that the stuff is going to be more and more integrated and part of what we do, in the same way that we are used to, like, we used to pay $2,000 an hour to go into a spirit room and use the same tools that are now available for free in Resolve. So it's just that progress is inevitable, or that change is inevitable. So And on the whole, I think it's a net positive for everybody.
John and Anthony, thank you so much for being with us today. But before we let you go, we've had a ton of questions come in from chat as well as various social media platforms. So let's get to those questions now. The folks at Blackspot. John, can you kind of go through some of the main tools that you used in some of the projects you mentioned and that we've talked about on this podcast?
Sure. I mean, we do have proprietary tools. We have a closed large language model system that we developed ourselves. But then we also work with an on-premise system called Kara One, which is sold by Scale Logic. And then we heavily use a product called Quickture, which is web-based. And Kara One is really useful for finding B-roll. It's really useful for finding intuitive moments that you wouldn't otherwise be able to find in large databases of footage. And Quickture is the kind of thing that, man, if you've got 20 hours of footage, you need to get that down to 5 minutes really quickly. It's incredibly adept at doing that kind of thing.
And so folks kind of understand kind of where the components fit in this one unique workflow. As you talked about, John, you have a lot of different tools and a lot of different workflows for different clients. Kara One is running on premises, right? It's an appliance, for lack of a better term, and it's not talking to the internet. It is completely shut off. Your data is not sent to the internet. It is looking only at the data you present, correct?
Absolutely. So it's a completely closed large language model that they started developing 8 years ago, actually well before OpenAI or anything like that even existed. So it's sort of a crazy box because it's incredibly intelligent, incredibly effective, but no, it's completely locked in. It fits all the security requirements that we have. But I will also say that even if you are using most of the solutions that are MPAA certified, if you're using them, they will also be closed. So even if they are doing their data storage in Azure or AWS or wherever it is, none of them are going out and looking at the larger internet. So nobody's data is going out. Nobody's training any data or training anything with the data that you have. They're all closed systems, but they work very well despite that.
And to reiterate, with all of your clients, you've proactively gone to them and say, we're utilizing these AI tools. Here is how they're being used. Here's what they do. And you've gotten their express written consent that you can use these tools with their media.
Absolutely. And often we find that we can't. One of the advantages we have is that we do have our own proprietary stuff that we can use, but we present all the tools that we're going to use to every client. And we do have to get their permission because otherwise, nobody wants a data breach any more than anybody wants somebody in your facility leaking footage out without permission. It's all going to be that secure. So, and then also there are union rules and there's all sorts of legal rules around the use of this kind of technology. So you always need to be cognizant of what your client's needs are before you put that in front of what your facility needs are.
And the other tool that you leaned on heavily, at least for one of these projects, is a newer product called Quickture. And for those looking for it online, it's Quickture. It's like picture, but pronounced with a Q. And you are essentially taking the output, the AAF that's Kara One is generating, and then you're loading that into Avid or Premiere as of right now, either or. And it's then transcribing those files and then using those files to create what we would commonly call a radio edit, right? It's generating that string out.
Yeah, but it's sufficiently intelligent that it's like talking to ChatGPT, even though it's different technology. But it works with the large language model so that you can speak to it as if you were speaking to a colleague. And what it gives everybody the opportunity to do, no matter where you are on the production chain, is it lets you just cut down on the amount of hours that you need to spend going through footage and trying to figure out what the story is. It gives you a big head start. So what it's not doing is not replacing anybody, but it's giving everybody on the creative team a chance to work faster and sooner, and then also to dedicate your brain space, your creative ability, giving you time to just be creative instead of being technical.
Excellent. And I see Ed Marks, a fellow Chicagoan. We're both fellow Chicagoans. Ed, it's great to see you. If you don't know Ed Marks, check out his filmography. Fantastic editor. One of the things Ed was asking you is, it would be great to see these things. And you're completely right. In fact, we've had a long conversation about how we can show these things, because it's just like when you watch the Oscars, right? And a film wins for best editing. We all know that great, something was put out, but you don't know what the source content was, right? So it's very difficult to show how well this tool works when you don't know the source content to see if it did make appropriate cuts.
Well, and I would say this about it too, is that you already have seen it. I mean, the stuff that we're doing is national campaigns. I'm not comfortable sharing, the names of my clients simply just, because AI is an automation is a sensitive thing, and what I would recommend is this: all the companies that do this and do this well are more than willing to give you a shot to experiment with their technology. So just try it. Get your footage involved with it. Look what it can do, and you can see what the change will be for you. And it won't work for everybody. And none of these tools work 100%. That they're always, getting you 50% closer, 80% closer, sometimes 10% closer. But you can't tell the difference, because at the end of every chain is a very talented editor, a very talented cream of producers and writers and colorists, and all those same people are still involved. They're just getting to their end result faster.
I think another way of looking at it is, for years we ingested from tape, and you had an assistant that was ingesting from tape, and then we moved to file-based workflows, and that cut down the amount of time it took to get that content from the original camera format into the system. So what we're doing with these tools is just saying, look, we're taking out some of the, I don't want to say monotony, I think that's a little bit dismissive, but we're taking some of the more industrial uses and compressing that timeline, so the humans, the actual talent behind these things, can then craft this radio cut, this string out, into something that is a good first cut to then iterate on and work with other humans on making it better.
Yeah, and I would say, when I started, I was one of 4 assistants working for my first boss. And my job was to just cut the film before we went to film to tape. And it was terrible. And if I still had to do that, I would not be in this business, because it was just onerous and it was painful. And that is all I did. And I didn't get a chance to cut. I didn't get a chance to make anything, because I was just sitting there with a splicer making this stuff. Now everybody has a chance to really go through and operate at the highest level. And it's really been impressive. And I'm thrilled with what our team is doing. From the least experience of us to the most experience of us, we've all seen a change in what we're able to do by implementing these tools.
Keycode Media folks, please keep the questions coming so I can see them here. A to Z is asking, what is the color correction AI called? John, are you currently using any AI assistive tools for color grading?
We are, and I'm sorry, I don't have the answer for that. Anthony has the answer for that. I'm not actually in the chair. I think we mentioned Color Lab AI, but I don't have the answer for that, but I'll get back to Keycode with it. I know they use a number of different tools to do everything from just setting black levels all the way through. I think I mentioned maybe in the earlier show that we took a show that was completely out of focus and put it back in focus in the color grading process. So, but I personally don't know, because I don't do that for a living. So I will have to ask Anthony and get back to Keycode with that.
I can certainly vouch for one of the products you mentioned, John, which is Color Lab. And for all you English folks, there's a U in there, so it's colorlab.ai, and it's a fantastic product. It a lot like Cara One and Quickshare, it gets you your first pass. It will help you with that balance pass before you go in and set the show look or the emotions you want to convey for those particular shots or scenes. So it's a way to get started a lot quicker. So let's see what other questions we have in here. Nice Foo Fighters poster. Sorry, Anthony's not here, but we'll pass that along to him.
That's true. He did a project called Power to the Patient. So he spent a couple of weeks with the Foo Fighters working on that project, and it was really fun.
Outstanding. So Keycode, like I said, Isaac on our team, please put in some more questions in here. So we're keeping things going. I see a lot of typing, but I'm not seeing a lot of questions. Let's see what else. John, another technology that is used quite a bit is remote editorial. Have you found kind of a mix of being able to do remote editing with these AI tools?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we're completely remote. We went remote during the pandemic and haven't looked back. So you can deploy it. You can deploy most solutions pretty much anywhere. If you have an on-premise solution, you could put it in a data center if that's where you're operating your edit machines from. So it really doesn't make a difference one way or the other. Even if you were using something like Avid Edit on Demand, these tools can operate independently of whatever your infrastructure is. So they can operate something as simple as a web interface, most of them. A lot of them do integrate with Premiere as a panel, but even the ones that do operate with a separate interface.
So to clarify, you're using both Adobe products and Avid products, correct?
And DaVinci, yeah.
Okay, so a question that's come in from Paul Allen is a little bit more Avid tinted. Has Avid enhanced the script sync software to allow AI assistance beyond the secondary database used for phonetic searches? Is that something you can address, John?
Yeah, I mean, so the last time that I spoke to Avid about it, like they're working on it, and I've seen their demos, and it gets better all the time. I think the difference between something like script sync and what we're talking about here is that script sync is only going to yield the results that you ask it for. So if you're looking for something specific, a specific phrase or a specific word, yes, it's going to give you all of those results. What these tools do is that if you type in something like I'd like to know why a skateboard is inherently unstable at a certain height or at a certain weight, of the rider, it will actually find that stuff. It'll dig in and give you stuff that's contextually related to what your query is, instead of just giving you the specific result that you're looking for. And that's really where the power comes in. Because phrase find is great and it saves a lot of time, but essentially you're still querying a transcript. This stuff is more intuitive. It's more like querying ChatGPT and asking it an esoteric question than it is doing a Command F on a transcript, for example.
And I should throw out there, Quickture is a fantastic product, but it's constantly evolving. Like right now, Quickture is audio-based, right? It's taking a transcription of what the clips are and then using that with the prompt that you feed it. So things like B-roll, right? Right now, unless the B-roll has some audio descriptor, that's going to be a little bit more difficult because there's no computer vision built into Quickture just yet. They're working on it. So for those folks who are like, well, my job is now over, AI still has a long way to go to even replicate, to replicate the more creative features that AI or that assistant editors are using. So let's see what other questions. Here's another one. What are your opinions on machine learning on someone's library content to create generative AI and create new content so it can be copyrightable? Example, Lionsgate and Runway.
That's a can of worms. We won't touch anything that's generative. Everything that we do is utilitarian or iterative. We are only using stuff that does not go out. We're not creating anything new based on the libraries to which we have access. So what we're doing is we are using the libraries. We're using these tools to understand them better, to make better content from them. But we're not training it or asking it to create anything new from what it does. The tools that do that are amazing. Like Sora is just staggering. But that's beyond the scope of what we do at this company. And I think that legally that would be a challenge that is sort of beyond my remit or my ability to answer. I would say that it is really possible to take advantage of machine learning in ways that do not impinge on anybody's copyright. And before you do try to impinge on anybody's copyright, or before you even scratch the surface, or if you even think that you're about to do that, stop and talk to a lawyer, because it's not cool and it's not fair.
And you bring up a very good point. There's a lot of litigation going on right now with a lot of the big AI providers, and those big AI providers, like things like Carol One, aren't even using, right? But there
Right.
are big AI providers right now where there is litigation on what content was used to be trained, and there's even a draft regulation in the UK regarding AI usage. So it's really up in the, I don't say up in the air, but we're still kind of muddling through that. I did see a comment from, where is it, from Sharon, who I think encapsulated this perfectly. And let me find what Sharon said. I seem to have just lost it. Here it is. Taking less time to do tasks means less hours and less days of work. We freelancers depend on our expertise to do things the best way, but doing boring, repetitive tasks helps keep us get our hours and pay. And I
That's
think that, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's really true. And I think that part of adopting these tools means that we fundamentally need to change the way that we operate as an industry. For example, to your point, we used to get paid by the piece that we created, whether we were creating spots or shows or whatever. By deliverable, we would get paid, and realistically, that doesn't work because the cost per deliverable is shrinking rapidly. Nobody can change that. We're not going to change that. Advertising dollars do not exist because advertising is entirely based on the internet now. And realistically, the most effective way to reach somebody is with a text ad on Google. So we're not getting paid as much as we used to get paid to create the stuff that we're doing, which means if you're dependent on an hourly wage or if you're dependent on a per deliverable billing system, it's really going to be difficult to make things work economically. The way to get around that, or the way to actually make things better for everybody, is the more that we can operate on retainer basis, which means that if we're engaged for a certain period of time for a set price, and then we agree to create as much content as we can in that period without worrying about the deliverables, then it defends everybody's wage. You're getting paid for your expertise and not getting paid for your ability to push a button. You're getting paid for your creativity. But it also lets you forecast what, if you're a facility owner like I am, lets us forecast what our revenue is going to be. It lets the clients know what they're going to have to spend, and then it lets creatives make more and better stuff than they ever would without having to worry about what that clock is actually doing. And so that's the way that we operate. We're trying to encourage as many of our friends and competitors to operate in the same way, because it really does work out for not only the clients, it works out for the facilities, the agencies, but also for the actual creatives who are making all the stuff. That this is why we're all here.
And I think I want to reiterate, just for the folks who are just joining, that without going down the terminology rat hole, there's a big difference between analytical, or what some companies call utility AI, and Gen AI. And nothing that Blackspot is doing is generative. It's taking data, it's harvesting metadata from existing media and making intelligent, assumed cuts and organization based on that. It's not rendering new data. It's not rendering out images or video. It's just getting the metadata that is already present, either visually or audibly.
Right.
So there are some folks asking to see it. I'll open up the curtain a little bit. I've actually had this discussion for the past couple of days with the folks at KeyCode, and we are doing everything we can to get content that you would understand immediately. Obviously, because of licensing rights, we can't just throw up the Wizard of Oz and say, look, we've automatically cut the beginning sequence. So we're trying to get some media that is engaging, that we can feed through the AI system and do this for you in kind of a tutorial fashion to show you it working. But given the compressed timeline and the fact that HPA, if you were familiar, was this past weekend, it's something we're working on in the background, and we hope to have something out to you to show you just how effective it can be to prep this content for an assistant editor. I see Mike is asking about Comfy UI. Yes, that's been a big topic of discussion because it does give access to AI tools with folks who may not want to work command line. So yes, there's a lot of work being done with that. I can't speak for Blackspot, but for other companies in the industry, it's kind of an experimentation phase, but it does help bring AI to the masses. Let's see, what else? John, were there any points you didn't think we made or that maybe you wanted to elaborate on during the podcast?
I think that the thing that most people are frightened of is that this is something that is going to eliminate jobs. And I really do want to stress that this is something that is really a force multiplier for everybody who uses it. It really makes you a better creative. It makes you a better producer. This stuff makes you a better writer, just because it's like having a huge team behind you. We are tasked as creatives now to make more stuff than ever before. There are more venues to display stuff. Everybody needs more stuff all of the time. There isn't sufficient money to fund us to do that, right? By using these tools, this actually opening up opportunities and creating new jobs for people, because we're able to operate in ways that we couldn't do if we were doing things in the linear fashion, or the way that we did them 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And if you are an agency or a facility owner, you know that your margins are not quite what they were 10 years ago. This is something that brings those margins back, lets you hire more people, better people, and really just expand your creative possibilities.
Well, I think that just about does it for the webinar today. We've had a lot of questions. I hope we've given you some answers. I know it's a scary time, but whenever there's new technology, there comes a period of adoption and incorporating it into your workflow. And as we've been saying for a while now, AI is not going to take your job. It's someone who knows how to use AI. So it falls upon us to learn AI. And that's one of the reasons why at KeyCode, we have various ways of learning AI, whether it be through our KeyCode education process, whether it be from educational podcasts like this. We're here to guide you through this kind of uncertain and rocky time. John, thank you so much for joining us. Please thank Anthony for us, and we'll see you on the next Broadcast to Post. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for watching Broadcast to Post. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive future episodes. Follow KeyCode Media on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to receive news on additional AV, broadcast, and post-production technology content. See you next time, folks.